What's up guys, welcome back. Thank you again for joining me for this discussion. In this video we're going to be discussing the Nintendo Switch and a possible 8GB revision model for the system. Is it possible? Is this what's actually happening? We're going to analyze the latest dev kit update from the guys at switchbrew.org who have the entire source code that they posted on their website. So I'm going to go ahead and say that if you do enjoy this discussion, please hit the like button and subscribe for more as we go forward. So let's go ahead and get started. So as we discussed before, the Nintendo Switch got a firmware update to 5.0.0, and this included various different things that the user could enjoy, like Twitter and Facebook access and things like that, and a lot of things that took place behind the scenes as well, including a lot of updates towards the hacking scene as far as disabling some of the functions that it had for the previous firmware, so hackers could not exploit it to use homebrew and to basically load their own code on it through the kernel. Now, the entire source code for this update was not made available until recently from the guys over at switchbrew.org. They went and compiled an entire list of everything that changed with this 5.0.0 update. And there's some interesting things in here. So first of all, the Nintendo Switch got this update. Now it was noticed in the changelog when it first took place a week ago that there's going to be a revision taking place for the Nintendo Switch APU or SoC, the Tegra X1 processor, to prevent it from having this boot ROM exploit that hackers have been using to load their own executables onto the Nintendo Switch. And this is an unpatchable hack that they took place, so it's a physical flaw, of course, that they found in the Tegra X1 processor. So Nintendo is going to be revising this chip and releasing it in future Nintendo Switch consoles to the market. Now, it was discovered that this chip is codenamed T214, which is another revision of the Tegra X1. They probably made some very specific modifications to this chip for piracy and hacking prevention. And it should be noted that the current chip that the Nintendo Switch uses is the T210 variant of the Tegra X1 processor. So this isn't really a completely different chip. It's still the Tegra X1. It is just a different variant that has been modified, most likely to stop this unpatchable boot ROM hack. And this revised processor is codenamed Mariko, M-A-R-I-K-O. Now, when this was first discovered, many people thought this was a brand new Nintendo Switch. Just from this codename being discovered, people thought that this was going to be a brand new Nintendo Switch. But now something else has been found additionally in this changelog by the guys from SwitchBrew. Now, as we know, the Nintendo Switch uses 4GB of total system memory for access to the operating system and for the graphics, and everything it does for gaming and for the system functionality. It uses 4GB total for the retail version of the Nintendo Switch. Now, according to this changelog, the DRAM ID assigned to the codename Mariko is using two different variants of Samsung RAM. It uses the 4GB variant and it uses an 8GB variant. Now that's very interesting, right? 8GB. So many people right away concluded that quite possibly the Nintendo Switch will be getting a revision in the future that will come with 8GB of system RAM on the console, in order to give the system more availability to extra textures and things like that stored in memory during gameplay. Now this all sounds really good, right? Like the system will get a RAM upgrade and basically a better version of the Nintendo Switch, just like the new 3DS had something similar as well. It had more RAM, it made the system faster, more snappy, and it had even games that took advantage of the extra space. And the 3DS also got a boost in processing power as well. So in the case of the Nintendo Switch, however, it's quite interesting though, because looking more closely at these changelogs, I found something very interesting for what the kernel in the Nintendo Switch is assigned currently for RAM to be used and allocated. So just a little ways down from that memory configuration for Samsung 4GB and 8GB, there's a kernel memory configuration here that says that the kernel reads this when setting up memory related to code. If bit 0 is set, it will memset various allocated memory regions with 0x58, 0x59, 0x5A instead of 0. This allows Nintendo developers to find uninitialized memory bugs. If bit 17-16 is 0B01, the kernel assumes 6GB of DRAM instead of 4GB. So of course I'm going to leave the link in the description, but if you look at all this, it appears that the current configuration of the kernel memory only allows developers to use 6GB of DRAM and 4GB of DRAM. There's various different development kits, I'm sure, out there. Indie developers, AAA third parties, things like that, they're not going to have all the same type of dev kit. But it is interesting here because the kernel is using 6 gigabytes or 4 gigabytes. It is not currently assigned to 8 gigabytes, even though the system is updated to support an 8 gigabyte model for RAM from Samsung. Now, looking back at the changelog, the current Nintendo Switch Tegra X1 is codenamed Arista, and it does use these 4 gigabyte and 6 gigabyte variants for its DRAM. So out of these different things that we're seeing here, we can come to a few different conclusions, and quite honestly, any one of them could be true or could end up true, but after this I'm going to give my best estimate as to what this really could mean. One theoretical possibility could be that Nintendo is releasing a 8 gigabyte version of the Nintendo Switch to retail when it supports this new Tegra X1 processor, the T214. And this system update has it all entailed into one update that's compatible with 2 different Nintendo Switch variants coming to retail. That could be one scenario, right? Or it could be this. It could be that the Tegra X1 214 processor is only compatible with the 4 gigabyte and the 8 gigabyte variants of the memory from Samsung. That could be a scenario as well. And the kernel can only use 4 gigabytes to 6 gigabytes for developers in their different development kits, which would mean that when this new Nintendo Switch modified version is released to retail, the 8 gigabytes that developers would have in their dev kits would only be using 6 gigabytes of that storage space. And one reason for that, and I'm just speculating here, would be that Samsung quite possibly could be phasing out the 6 gigabyte variant of their memory sticks that they are currently selling at mass production. 4 gigabyte variants and 8 gigabyte variants are much more common to vendors and to even the consumer when they go out and purchase them. You don't usually purchase 6 gigabyte variants of RAM or memory. So the 6 gigabyte variant of the Nintendo Switch dev kit could quite possibly be getting phased out completely, and maybe in the future they're going to be updating the Switch again in order to only use 4 gigabytes and 8 gigabyte variants. But since the kernel was designed to use 4 gigabytes and 6 gigabytes to developers, it may only be using 6 of the 8 gigabytes available, and this is more common than you think because when memory goes in short supply, the prices tend to go up. Now, unrelated to this, Samsung has recently said that they are focusing more on the 8 gigabyte variants of their RAM as far as HBM2 is concerned. Now, even though the Switch uses LPDDR4, it does make sense that they would eventually transfer to a 4 gigabyte variant and an 8 gigabyte variant to developers. Now, while a retail Nintendo Switch at 8 gigabytes is theoretically possible, of course, I'm not going to rule that out at all. However, usually when a system is upgraded like that, with the RAM being doubled as far as in comparison to the current retail version, usually the processor itself is also enhanced as well. So the Tegra T214 X1 processor that they're using in this updated variant that's going to be released to retail, this is still basically the Tegra X1. So this is not the Tegra X2 or something in the future that NVIDIA is working on. This is still based on the original processing power, probably with some modifications to it. Doubling the memory is not necessarily going to increase much of the processing power of the system. The processing power still is going to be basically the same, and theoretically it would have more access to things like textures faster, stored in memory during gameplay in certain types of games if this were the case. But usually when you have that extra memory, you need a faster chip to access that memory in order for it to appear on screen. So it's hard to say if they will really actually use this extra memory in the final retail version released in the future for the consumer. My best guess is that this is a development kit update and that the 8 gigabyte variant will be coming in the future for developers to use, and they quite possibly could be phasing out the 6 gigabyte variant of their memory that they're using for the current Nintendo Switch, making it compatible with 4 gigabytes and 8 gigabytes only if Samsung is in fact phasing out that memory chip. Again, this is all speculation on my part, but it does make sense. However, Nintendo could still come out with enhanced Nintendo Switch with increased memory. It's just according to this, it doesn't seem too likely at this point, but of course we're going to leave the door open to the possibility. Alright guys, so I hope everyone was able to understand that well enough in order to get the gist of what I was trying to explain here with the Nintendo Switch and the update, but please feel free to let me know what you think in the comment section. Do you think that this does mean Nintendo's going to release a upgraded version of Nintendo Switch to retail, or do you think that this is simply a developer update for dev kits only and that the consumer simply won't see the benefit of this update at all? Let me know what you think about it. Again, if you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, and I'll talk to you guys very soon in the next video. Have a great day.